I always forget to start it. Hello, Tony. How are you?
Hello, Enoch. I'm good. How are you?
This is our next poo cast. Would you like to run the poo cast? It's probably better than me, so I don't run into something. Here you go. Are you guys going to introduce yourself?
Hey, I'm Juliana. I'm a final year vet student.
Woo!
I'm Lily. I'm also a final year vet student. These are our last 2 weeks, so we should know some shit.
You know shit. Well, as cattle veterinarians, we know shit. Trust me. Like human doctors, they think they know shit. 2 fingers. Us? The whole lot. That's knowing shit. Almost in a biblical sense. So tell us where you're from again, because it's pretty exciting, actually.
We're from St. George's University initially, and then for our clinical year, we all get sent off, and we both came to Murdoch University in Perth.
Where did you grow up? That's the cool part.
I grew up in the U.S. Virgin Islands in the Caribbean.
And I grew up in Zambia, Lusaka, Zambia, which is in southern Africa.
All right.
That's sick.
And I grew up in Wild Horse, Colorado. What a cool name for a town, eh?
Yeah, that is.
There's only 4 people there left. Mom, Dad, and the Laffertys. But they're really lovely people, all the people that live there. Soon it'll just be both of them that live there, I reckon, eventually. Hi. All right, so today we're going to talk about prick testing. We're going out to prick test some cows. Why do we prick test cows? Number 1.
See if they're pregnant.
Yeah, but why?
Because of production?
Absolutely. So give me, what's the production benefit of diagnosing the empties?
So we can breed them again and get them full. That way we're not like losing a cycle.
In dairy cows, absolutely. We rebreed them. In a beef production system where we've got a window where we want them to calve in. Really, we're just diagnosing the empties so that they can. Sorry.
Go to slaughter.
Yeah, so they can exit the system.
Oh, nice.
And be replaced by heifers.
Okay.
So essentially, on average, the average producer, let's say a producer's got 1,000 cows, as their static breeding herd, and let's say they get a 90% conception rate per year, so they get 900 calves out of their 1,000 cows. How many replacement heifers will they generally hold back, roughly? And there's no right or wrong answer, but it's kind of an interesting little metric just to know off the top of your head. You have a guess?
Just over 100.
It is over 100, yeah, because obviously you got to replace the empties. It's about 20% generally.
Okay.
So what we do is we prick test and we diagnose the empties, and we'll come back to that in a minute. And so the empties need replaced.
Yeah.
We also get rid of animals that are what they call cast for age, so girls that are losing their teeth. And then the reason we're getting rid of stuff is for welfare reasons. So we get rid of bad tits, bad feet, bad attitudes, cast for age, and empty. So bad tits is a bad welfare outcome for their calf. Bad feet's a bad welfare outcome for them. Cast for age as well. They start to where they struggle because they're losing teeth eventually, and they can't hold condition. And then bad attitudes, bad welfare outcome for us.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's all welfare driven. And the empties, they exit the system and they're replaced by heifers. So the cool thing about what I love about production animal medicine as veterinarians and as servicing this industry is, like if you look over here, what we got over here, look that way.
Wheat.
Yep. Okay. So lots of people eat wheat, and they're quite happy to eat wheat. But you know what lives in there? Wheat. You know what else lives in there?
Mice.
Nothing. Nothing. It's monoculture, which by definition excludes biodiversity.
Yeah.
Same as over there. Now, especially in the U.S., where the bison used to roam, the grassland ecosystem, which is where I grew up. I grew up out in eastern Colorado in a town of, there were 12 people there when I grew up. And all my friends were ranchers. My family had homesteaded out there in 1909. The government said, here you go, live out here, ran cows. And so I grew up around cattle people. And I used to go down to the creek and catch frogs and lizards and catch snakes and chase deer and rabbits and everything else. And that ecosystem in the U.S. where cattle are still being run is completely intact because the cattle have essentially, is within the food web, have taken the role of the bison. And there were about 35 million bison at the turn of the century, back in 1900 or the mid 1800s, before we hunted them almost to extinction. They got down to 700 bison, which is mad. It's absolutely crazy. Like it's freaking, you go far out. How could we do that? Anyway, we did a lot of dumb things in the past, and we'll continue to do dumb things in the future. But hypothetically, we'll keep moving forward. But so what happened is people started, fencing things off, started running cattle. People soon realized that rotational grazing and mimics the role of the bison, and it helps people get more out of their ground. Right. It also allows the biodiversity of the plants to improve, which results in better habitat for all the wildlife that exists as well. So pretty cool. So growing up, we had 2 different sorts of farms where I grew up. There's people out there, give them the land, Some people went broadacre, and some people still ran cattle. And I know where I played as a kid. I always played with the cows because that's where all the life was. That's where things were happening.
Yeah.
And so when I went to uni, I was just like, whoa, what's going on? I thought everyone would be like me, loving livestock, loving agriculture. And I was quite like, whoa, what the hell's going on? What do you mean you don't love agriculture? So that was quite an interesting thing for me. I also got a job as a field herpetologist, which is super rad. So I drove around eastern Colorado, picking up frogs, lizards, toads, as indicators of environmental health.
Yeah.
And so that was a great job. I just drove around all day
Yeah.
with my mates. I did it for 3 summers, and then that absolutely put my convictions, they just solidified them, set them in concrete, set them in absolute iron. That the role of a cattle producer versus the alternative is way better for the environment. The biodiversity, like when we got into the areas where people were broadacre farming, it was an ecological dead zone. There's nothing there, and so I really gained an appreciation for how cattle producers are actually supporting life. So then that got me thinking about it more, and I got thinking about wild animals and like, what do I want to be when I'm reincarnated? And I'm like, God, do I want to come back as an eagle? Do I want to come back as a sea turtle, et cetera, right? So like a sea turtle generally lays about 200 eggs per clutch. They don't start laying eggs until they're about 30, which is crazy. And they can live to 100, so that's 70 opportunities to lay eggs. It's around 20,000, 200 times 3, 600 times 70. It's an enormous amount of eggs, right? So let's say it's 20,000 eggs. Out of all those eggs, how many of those crawl back onto the beach and lay eggs? And it's just like, it's one. It's one. Because if it's not one, the population would increase.
Yeah.
Every female in nature replaces herself before she decides to leave the planet. And it's the same with a well-managed cattle herd. You got 1,000 cows on a property, and the place we're going to is running 5,000 cows on 35,000 acres. They take those 5,000 cows, they run them, and every year they keep about 1,000 heifers, and those 1,000 heifers come in and they try to get them pregnant. They get about 800 of them pregnant. Out of those 800, they replace the 10% empty, which is 500. They replace the bad teeth, the bad tits, the bad attitudes, and so it's in balance.
Yeah.
But the difference is all the surplus calves, because remember they produce about 4,500 calves. All those surplus calves, so 4,500 minus 1,000 is 3,500 cows. There's 3,500 surplus babies, yearlings. What happens to them? Well, this is the part that I feel good about, is I help them look after them. So when things are hungry, we feed them. When they're thirsty, we give them something to drink. When they're sick, we medicate them. And in the end, they get humanely euthanized. And there's lots of people that don't eat meat for various reasons, and I don't begrudge them that at all. Like, some people don't like the taste of it, et cetera, but I feel like I'm helping the environment by supporting livestock. So that's why I love doing what I do as a cattle vet. But it's one in, one out, right? Now, in the wild population of animals, like when we had those 35 million bison, the population was stable and was based on the carrying capacity of the land.
Yeah.
So they had the same. If there was 5,000 wild bison living in an area, they had 3,500 extra babies. What happened to them? Well, they didn't die ethically or humanely. They died through starvation, predation, various different ways. So that's why I like what we do.
Yeah.
Anyhow, let's get back to preg testing. Far out, we totally lost it. All right, so we're going to preg test some cows. So we're going to find these empties and get rid of them. So what economic advantage or what production advantage or advantage to the rest of the animals does that incur? So when we find these empties, what are we going to do with them? We're going to ship them, right? So what does that mean for the rest of the animals that remain?
It means that there's space. Yeah, space.
Yeah, more food.
Resources. Yeah.
So
resources.
So the property is set up to run X amount of animals, and the amount of animals that you can run on a property is predicated on how many resources exist there. And then also right now we're going into our carrying capacity limiting time of year. So the feed's gone off, and now we're preg testing now, and we're going to take all the empties and they're going to leave, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that means that we can only carry so many animals. So by finding the empties now, because we're going to find them now, even though we're weaning the calves that are on them off, and the pregnancy that's in them isn't going to hit the ground until, say, maybe June, and we're not going to, which is in about 7 months' time, and then we're not going to probably calf mark until maybe July, so that's about 8 months away. So we're able to take these girls out of the production system 8 months early.
Yeah.
So if 10% are empty, and 8 months out of 12 is 2/3, so that means, 2/3 is 6.66666. We can run 6.66666 more cows on that same property. 90% of those are pregnant, so 90% of 6.66666 is 6. So we can produce 6% more calves on the same resources,
Wow.
which is really, really good. So if I said to you, hey, I'm going to give you a 6% raise, you'd be like, hell yeah. And that's essentially what we're doing with producers is we're preg testing for them so they can produce 6% more calves, which means 6% more cash, which means 6% more medicine, more food, more new pickup, all that good stuff. So it's really, really rad. So it costs about, let's say it costs $5 a head to preg test, and if we can run 6% more calves, and let's say the calves are worth $1,000, which a couple of years ago they were worth $2,000, now they're worth about $1,000. Let's say they're worth $1,000. 6% is $1,000, so that's $600. So that is for a $5 investment, we're getting a $600 return.
Wow.
Or sorry, $60 return because 10% are empty. $600 per hectare. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's freaking unbelievable. The return on investment is just huge. Super cool. If I haven't got myself too confused. Okay, so now we're going back to practicing. So what are we going to do? How are we going to practice these girls? We're going to ask them, are you pregnant? The cows do know. And eventually we will be able to ask them, are you pregnant? And they'll go.
They're like, yes, we're definitely pregnant. Don't feel it. I'm just kidding.
So what are we going to do?
Well, we'll get a history first from the farmer to hear like when they were last covered and how.
Yep, which is a good point to bring up. If a farmer example says on a preg test, we want to make sure we're there in a window when we can accurately diagnose them. So what's about the earliest you can preg test them by hand?
Like 35.
Yeah, like the real skillful dairy practitioners can probably get down because they do a lot of early pregging.
Yeah.
Because as you alluded to before, they'll identify the empties so that they can continue to try to get them pregnant. So they'll probably preg test down to 28, 29, 30 days.
Yeah.
With an ultrasound, possibly even earlier. For beefies, we tend to wait until the heart goes inside makes that tube and it closes over, and so the calves are pretty stable, and that is at 6 weeks.
Okay.
So for most of our clients here, we say, like 5 to 6 weeks after the bull comes out. So it's generally 6 weeks. Because we're not in a big rush, because in a production system like this, the calves on them are going to, at 6 weeks, are going to be 4.5 months along. So 4.5 months, they're going to be about maybe 180 kilos. So they're not ready to be weaned anyway, so there's no rush. But for a lot of our clients, we preg test about 6 weeks out, find the empties, get them going early, because there's production value there. Their calves look around for mom, steal a drink here and there. And so there's a kind of a win and a loss. But most guys probably 2 to 3 months after the bulls come out on our cows, and on the heifers we get in as soon as we can. Okay. 5 to 6 weeks. But cool. So good point. We ask them when the bulls went in, when the bulls came out. Cool means. So now, how are we going to preg test them? Like, let's get into the poo of it.
Put them in a crush. I don't know. Yeah, put them in a crush.
Yep. Which in the US they call a shoot. Yep.
A shoot.
Ultrasound?
Yeah. But what are you guys going to do? We're going to teach you guys.
Transrectal palpation.
That's it. Transrectal. It's such a good word.
Yeah. And then we'll see if we can feel those 4 signs of pregnancy. I know that.
Let's rattle some off. That's going to be awesome.
Okay, great. So what was it?
Amniotic vesicle.
Yeah.
Yep. So those are for real early ones. So that's a good opportunity for a question. When does the amniotic vesicle soften? When can you start to feel the calf?
35 days.
The amniotic. When does it soften?
Like 60.
Yeah, 60 days. Yep. So prior to that, it feels like a turgid ball. So for myself, it's like that's 37 days, one finger, 42, 47, 52, and 60 across my hand. You guys are probably 35, 40, 45, 50, and you just work out your own thing. But until about day 60, the vesicle is turgid. It's like a racquetball. You can't feel the calf. But then, and that's why when they have the 4 positive signs of pregnancy, you've got calf and vesicle as 2 separate ones. Because you can only feel the calf or the vesicle. You can't feel both.
That makes sense.
The vesicle turns, it softens, and then you can feel the calf. And that happens about 60 days. So, good. Sweet. So vesicle's one of them.
Placentomes.
Placentomes. Let's go through those. So, well, we went through the vesicle, so 37, 42, 47, 50. So, and then what we do is when you go in and pick up a uterus, when it's an early pregnancy, what's your first thing that you're going to notice in these, going back to vesicles, and this is dairy preg testing if you're doing it by hand, what's the first thing you're going to notice that kind of triggers you that you're going to be chasing a vesicle?
I don't know, is it like the weight? I don't know.
There's probably not much weight in them when they're that early.
The texture, like how soft or...
Yeah, it'll soften, that's one, yep. 2, what's something that you'll notice, because remember they got their bicornua, meaning 2 horns. What will you notice?
Will it just be one horn is like larger than the other?
Absolutely, yes. So asymmetry. And asymmetry is a real trigger for looking into something. Where are most of the pregnancies? Which horn?
Left.
It was a 50-50. Phone a friend.
Yeah.
So they're usually in the right horn.
Okay.
Right.
And it's about 60%. So it's about 2 out of 3 times. If you did 2 out of 3 times, they're going to be in the right. Now, what happens when a horn gets pregnant? This is kind of cool. It'll get fluid, acclimation, yep.
Yeah.
Now, what it's going to do is it's going to roll to the heavy side.
Oh.
So the uterus is like that, sitting in there in the broad ligament.
Yeah.
You know that flat membrane there?
Yeah.
And it's going to roll sideways.
That just makes sense.
So when you go in as a new palpator, you know what you're going to feel? The non-pregnant horn. And so it's a pretty common mistake of a novice palpator to go in and grab that and go, oh, I love you. Oh, I can feel the horn. It's so good. I can feel the ovary. Oh, she's empty. And I go, oh, right. You go in there and go, oh, reach over it. And so when you go in, if you do feel a horn here, and it'll often be laying sideways, curled like that,
Yeah.
then reach your hand over the top of it and slide side to side. You'll pick up, bum, 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 bum. You'll pick up the little calf or the vesicle.
Okay.
Now, to ascertain the size of that vesicle, you kind of grab the horn, kind of like feeling your knuckle.
Yeah.
So when we go into the uterus, early on, is we're taking our hand, as soon as we go into the rectum, and I'm going to get you guys to go left-handed.
Okay, yeah.
In my opinion, it's easier for me to teach you, and in my opinion, it's easier for you to palpate, because the uterus is pushed to the right due to the rumen.
Yeah.
So as you go into the rectum, the first thing you do is you're coming across, like imagine this is the inside of the cow's pelvis,
Yeah.
and you're coming along the floor of the pelvis.
Yeah.
And luckily, the uterus is always attached to the vagina with the cervix in between, so it makes it pretty easy to find.
Yeah.
So it's right there on the bottom. And the thing to remember, because in our mind we think of those horns just kind of laying there in space.
Yeah.
They're curved up and they're in a broad ligament. So the broad ligament's like this flat sheet.
Yeah.
And so the uterus is sitting there in that flat sheet with the horns often curled up under it. And so to get to those buggers, you got to kind of come along and you got to push fairly firmly down and curl that broad ligament under that vagina and cervix. So you've got it under, so your hand's under it like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Now if you lift it up, it's nice and light. And as you alluded before, when you're doing heavier pregnancies, that's quite indicative of as a hint as to whether or not they're pregnant. But then you need to get to those horns, which are still curled up. And the trick to doing that is kind of cool, is you take it and push it up to the right. Now take your thumb and jam your thumb under that ligament there. So you're holding it over. This gives you these fingers to do stuff.
Yeah.
So with these fingers, you can then slide forward and grab that left horn and pull it back. So you're unfurling it.
Yeah.
Alternatively, it might be lying there where you're just right there and it's right there. But if it's curled up under the broad ligament, which sometimes it is, that's how you can kind of free up that uterus. And when it's an empty, then once you've got it, you can go across to the other side. Sweet. So in early pregnancy, the vesicle, you estimate the size of it by getting your hand around that pregnant horn and just kind of gently, because you don't want to disrupt that vesicle and the amniotic sac around it, which is where the membrane slip comes from. You can kind of rub it and you'll feel that ball. You go, oh, that feels like a ping pong.
Okay.
No, it should be around that 42 days. Or that feels like a pea, which is more around that 35 days. So that's cool. Awesome. Righto. So give the vesicle. Then the next thing up is once the vesicle softens, we're feeling the calf. So let's go through calf sizes. So it softens in 60 days. And in 60 days, how big's the calf?
Rat size. No, mouse size.
Mouse. That's right. Yep.
Tiny.
Mouse. Yep. And my old way to remember it was 3 dime rats.
Yeah.
3 dime rats. See them run.
Oh, yeah.
So 3 months is a rat.
Yeah.
That's
So then from there you can go up and down. So what is it at 3 months?
it's the rat.
Rat. And 4 months?
Small cat.
Small cat, yep. And at 5 months?
Cat.
A big cat or a small dog, yep. And at 6 months it's kind of like a kelpie. Or what do they say in the US, a beagle?
Yeah.
Cool
Little
beans.
eagle.
I feel like a kelpie is larger than a beagle.
Yeah, okay. Or a kelpie. Yeah. Some sort of dog.
Yeah.
I'm a cow vet. So yes, that's super right. Okay. So generally, when you kind of get a perception is the more and more you do, you get a feel like you get to a stage where you're not so much feeling the calf as much as you're seeing the calf with your hand, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Kind of like a person that is blind that reads Braille.
Yeah.
You know, they soon, you know, they're seeing with their hand. Cool beans. Yep. So 3 dime rats runs you up and down. So what are the other parts of that 3 dime rats? Well, there's the size of the head.
Yeah.
So the head from the crown, back of the head to the tip of the nose at 3 months is 3 fingers. So 3 dime rats. So the back of the head to the tip of the nose is 90 days. And I reckon that's 100 is 4 fingers. And across your hand is 4 months,
Okay.
120. And I reckon 5 months is about your thumb with in there as well.
Okay.
And and then you can go down to an 80 head and a 70-day head, which is kind of rad. And then the dimes are, we don't have dimes in Australia. We have 5 cent pieces, which are the same size as the dime in the US. So the reason dimes are so small for Australians is America had the gold standard. So the amount of silver in a coin was equivalent to the value of the currency. So a 50 cent piece was pretty big. 25 cent piece was half the weight, and a 10 cent piece was 40% of the weight of a quarter. Put you to sleep.
That's cool.
So the dimes are quite small. They're smaller than a 5 cent piece, which to Aussies is weird. Like, why in the hell are your 10 cent pieces smaller than your 5 cent pieces? I was like, well, why are your $2 coins smaller than your dollar coins? So it's anyway. So the 10 cent piece, and those are the size of the cotyledons, it's not actually the cotyledon. You're actually feeling the carbuncle or the placentome, as you guys said. So it's the size of the placentomes, roughly speaking, at 3 months. And then up from there, for 4 months is a 25 cent piece or a quarter, or a 20 cent piece in Australia, and at 5 months is a 50 cent piece. But cotyledons, placentomes, they lie to you because they average 64, but they can vary from like in the 30s up to a couple hundred. So the more there are, the smaller they are. So the cotyledons can lie to you. Middle uterine artery is probably a better way to estimate heavily pregnant animals, and I actually don't know the sizes, but I've got a vague, feeling of, geez, that's quite large. Going for the larger middle uterine artery. So that's those guys. Cotyledons, we covered cotyledons. We've covered the size of the calf. We've covered the vesicle. So we're gonna bang our hands up their bums. We're gonna feel these babies. We are going to draft out the empties, and they're gonna go to market, and we're not going to waste them. We're going to feed some hungry people with them, which is super rad. So I reckon that's good. Yeah. Dynamite. All right. Any other quick questions before we get into these bumps?
I did have one, but I can't remember.
Because we're around the corner. What about you, Tony? You got any questions?
No, not that I can think of on the spot.
Is there anything on the preg testing side that I missed? So I'll be using an ultrasound. So quick, remember sensitivity and specificity in school?
Yeah.
Always fun. Are ultrasounds sensitive for pregnancy or specific for pregnancy, or both?
You can't trust. Sensitive is you can trust the negatives, right? And specific is you can
Correct.
trust the positives.
Yes.
Okay.
Like if you think of sensitive, it's like you overreact to anything.
But I trust that.
And if someone's slurring you, absolutely don't miss it. You're like, oh, I can't believe you said that.
Yeah.
Just so sensitive.
I'd say it's sensitive. It's specific.
It's specific, yeah.
There we
So if
go.
you can see the pregnancy with the ultrasound,
Oh, then it's there, obviously.
it's you see a fetus, like it's a fetus. And if its heart's beating, tick, 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 tick,
And if you don't
it's
see
absolutely.
it, it doesn't
If you don't
mean
see it,
it's
maybe you got the probe in the wrong spot.
Yeah.
And there are some classes of cows that can be difficult to visualize with the ultrasound.
Yeah.
So what would they be? Early ones, late ones, middle ones? And tell me about the cows.
Maybe, isn't it middle? Oh, okay,
It is.
I don't know.
Yep,
Okay.
no, you're right.
Is
Yep,
it
yep.
because the weight like pulls them down into
Yes.
the abdomen? So that, okay, great.
Yep,
Woohoo!
100% right.
We know something.
Especially in multiparous cows, so cows that have had multiple calves, they get a bit saggy,
Yeah.
their uteruses. So even some of those really old girls, even an empty uterus might be down in the abdomen, like it never retracts back up into the uterus because they lose their spring. Insert bad analogy here, which we'll avoid. And if they're say 4 or 5 months pregnant, the calf is still small enough that the brim of the pelvis is kind of like a box, going into it, and the ultrasound's looking down. And if a cow's fat, like if she's in like extreme body condition, so it's often fat old cows in mid to late-ish pregnancy, where the calf's not big enough. Because once the calf's like 8 or 9 months, it's pretty hard to miss it. And so when you go in with your arm to check them, you go, oh right, there's sometimes you can only just feel the cervix, and then what you do is you kind of hook it under your arm, and then with your backhand feel back under for the cotyledons. Or you can reach down and just barely feel some cotyledons, or you can feel the middle uterine artery, which will be really big by that stage on one side, or bigger on one side. So it is specific, but if you're a skilled palpator, the hand is more sensitive.
Yeah.
It is, which is why they work well together. Which is why with our new grads that work for us, like Tony, we try to get them going with manual palpation first, because we check all our empties by hand to confirm that they're truly empty. And that's also really good learning too, is when you're preg testing, when you go in and pick up the empty uterus. Because if you don't, the analogy I use is if I was to give you an ultrasound from the get-go when you're learning be like giving you a crutch when you're a kid, like a baby. You know, you'd become very good on a crutch, but you'd never learn to run. You always need that stick to walk around. So it's a bit like that with the ultrasound. So that's the story. But so anyway, what we could do is we could stitch on the back of this. You guys practice. That'll be sick.
Sweet.
It'll be like one of the first times when I did some actual editing.
Oh,
Wow,
you'll get some crazy views for that.
that's gonna be awesome. Okay, let's
Sweet.
Bye.